This is the Made for Living Well podcast, hosted by Alexa Sherm, the place to create a life well lived.
Welcome back to Made for Living Well podcast. My name's Alexa, and I am honored you're here and following along in the Health School podcast. Now, I have had a few people reach out so excited about this series and all the things that they're learning that they want to take the deeper dive into Health Made Simple. Really, the goal with Health Made Simple is to help you see health in a new way. And more than that, help you to live it out in your everyday life. Because at the end of the day, we have to let go of the belief that health is a destination and start seeing it as an everyday action. And there are lots of ways to do that. And inside Health Made Simple, I teach you how with quick and easy lessons you can listen to on the go, as well as the download that gives you all of the information to make it practical in your everyday life. And I would love to have you inside and join our live community where I teach monthly classes and check in weekly to help hold you accountable and answer any personal questions you have. You can join Health Made Simple over at thelivingwell.com. And if you leave a rating and review for this podcast and send me a screenshot, we will send you back a code to get $50 off that class. Clearly, ratings and reviews mean a lot to us. So even if you don't want to join Health Made Simple, I would love if you would leave a rating and review. It helps other people find the show who otherwise wouldn't, making the show more accessible to everyone. So thank you in advance for doing that. Now, today we are progressing along in our podcast series called Health School. The last two lessons have been solely devoted to understanding the nervous system and how important that is to changing and transforming how your body responds. Now, like all things in health, we kind of get fixated on specific areas and we think inside of our minds that we need to work to avoid them, like health is a static thing, or that you can reach a specific nervous system state and stay there forever. But that's not the case. Your body is always in motion, just like life is always changing, and therefore your body is always shifting to survive and hopefully thrive within that environment. Like everything is always moving. And one of the best things that we can do is learn to work with that movement, which means learning to work with your body, supporting it for what it needs in the everyday life. And the same is true for your hormones. Because again, like your nervous system is attached to your metabolism, your hormones are also attached to your nervous system. And I know in the health space, hormones are like this sexy word that we really try to influence and understand, and we get really, really focused in on hormones. And don't get me wrong, I think we have a lot of hormonal issues in our world today, but I also believe that hormones are a symptom of a deeper root issue. Most often, the root issue comes from lifestyle deficiencies. And I say this because of what we know about the hormonal hierarchy. And that's what I want to talk about today. The link between your hormones and your nervous system, and understanding this can help shift all of your hormones. Because I really want to say that most people don't actually have a hormonal problem. At least that's not the root problem. More than likely, it has to do with a nervous system problem that really comes from dysfunction in the nervous system or other things affecting the bottom tier hormones. Now, I'm going to give you this image over in the show notes, so if you want to go there to get a visual of what I'm speaking about, go ahead and do so. You can find it at thelivingwell.com/330. But the hormonal hierarchy shows that not all of your hormones are responding exactly the same way every given day. In fact, there are certain hormones that influence other hormones, and those influence other hormones. And inside this hierarchy, there's 3 tiers. I like to look at this as like a pyramid. The bottom tier are what we consider our controlling hormones or our master hormones. These master hormones include cortisol, insulin, and even oxytocin. And those hormones influence tier 2 hormones, which are your DHEA and your thyroid hormones, which then influence the top tier hormones, which are your sex hormones. Now, of course, your sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, those do tend to be a little bit noisier. and they produce symptoms that we all dislike, like infertility and PMS, and maybe even some autoimmune conditions that are hormonally linked. However, if we want to see the bigger issue, we have to recognize that while those hormones are certainly noisy, they are generally not the problem, but the problem happens further down on the tier. Of course, this isn't always the case. Sometimes we do just have a deficiency in producing some hormones. But again, arguably for the majority of people, the problems exist deeper down inside the pyramid. And that's why today I want to talk about this subject. Because in the next podcast, we are going to have an expert come on talking about sex hormones. And that is all so important. But I also want to make sure we understand this pyramid because it is interconnected in the whole of who you are. And I think this work is really fascinating because when we look at health today, I think most of us are dealing and struggling through with problems while missing that most of those problems exist because of simple lifestyle deficiencies. And if we go back to the last lesson, as it relates to the nervous system, some of those deficiencies just come out of a lack of safety and also a lack of movement or a lack of flow. Getting stuck in one specific nervous system state can significantly change the flow of your entire hormonal circuit. Likewise, a lack of nourishment can. And today I really want to break that down because those master hormones have a ton of power over the rest of the hormones in your body. And how those hormones respond are really changing the outcomes of your cells. Now, again, this is not to diminish the fact that there are a lot of hormonal issues in our world, but to help you see a bigger solution. A solution that not only helps heal your hormones, but it does change the flow of your entire life. Now, interestingly, when we look at those master hormones of cortisol, insulin, and oxytocin, those are most often connected to what we consider these big lifestyle deficiencies. One is our nervous system response, or getting stuck in one specific state, most often in that stress state, so a lack of movement or flow there. The second one has to do with connection. Oxytocin is directly linked to our connection, to our stored memory, to our ability to empathize and be relational. And again, in a world that promotes independence, of course we struggle with oxytocin. And then last but not least is energy. The single most important factor of all of health is the concept and understanding of energy. And in that hormonal flow, that hormone responsible for energy is often insulin. And how much or how little, or rather I should say how balanced or how unbalanced, regulated or unregulated these hormones are going to influence the second tier of hormones, which tend to be those thyroid hormones or those hormones that are responsible for energy flow, for metabolic output. And from there, that's going to then influence those sex hormones. How much or how little you have inside your body, or how balanced or unbalanced they are, which is really what it boils down to. Symptoms come because of a lack of balance. And of course, this makes sense if we think about it, right? Like most of the stressors in our life are energy deprivers. They take energy, and when you don't have energy to give, of course, you're going to have sex hormone issues. Like all things fertility-wise, I know sex hormones aren't just for your fertility, but all things fertility-wise, including your libido, your ability to reproduce, all take mass amounts of energy. And if energy is scarce, whether because you're overstressed, you have poor connections, or you have an imbalance in blood sugar, it's going to be really difficult to ever experience the thriving state of sex hormones that allows you then to recirculate through these hormones in a healthier way. Like you're not going to be able to reproduce. And when we talk about fertility issues in America, one of the leading reasons we have so many fertility issues is because the body feels unsafe, whether that's from a lack of nourishment, bad stories, excess stress, a lack of connections. And therefore, just because the body is depleted in itself and it doesn't feel safe enough to then engage in the thought of reproduction. I think one interesting thing to remember about our body is, again, that its number one job is to keep you alive. And in some points of survival, your body will shut off unnecessary functions in order to supply the necessary energy to maintain critical function. That's why when we're stressed, again, we tend not to have a libido. Our fertility decreases, but so does our digestion. Like, we can't digest food when we're overly stressed. Just like we can have intimate relations, that does not necessarily mean that we're going to produce a healthy outcome or the desired outcome. So in times of a lack of energy or in excess stress, our body works to conserve energy. And in the process of that conservation, it does shut down what it considers unnecessary functions. And oftentimes, that is a healthy flow of sex hormones that do give you this vibrant form of energy. And not having the healthy flow of sex hormones not only changes your fertility and your libido, it can change your menstrual cycle, but also those are significantly impacting your neurotransmitters. And again, this is where we see the loop of our biology, that your mindset can influence your biology and your biology is influencing your mindset. It's all working together to keep you alive. And while it's your body's job to do that, it's your job to learn how to support your body so that it can thrive. Like, it's your job to get you well. And getting you well and healthy comes from action. And as I mentioned in the very beginning of this podcast, I think the reason that we are here is that we have a multitude of lifestyle deficiencies. And I know when we get on the hormonal concept, we want to talk about estrogen and testosterone and progesterone. And yes, all of those things matter. But finding the right balance of sex hormones is really delicate. In fact, it's changing every single day and arguably hour to hour. So it's not always in our benefit to try to micromanage our hormones, just like it's difficult to micromanage thyroid hormones, especially when people need them. But it is easier to work on managing and influencing those bottom tier hormones. That's where we have the most control. And when you understand that these hormones influence all the other hormones, it's easier to trust that working on these three master hormones alone can make a world of difference in the health of your whole. And so when we talk about hormones, I really do think it's important to, yes, understand your cycle, understand your sex hormones, but use those things as understanding of how balanced your master hormones are. And when your sex hormones get out of whack and they're really noisy, so you're going to understand them, whether it's through PMS or a lack of fertility, you can then go back to working on the master hormones, the ones that are going to make the most difference. And that, again, comes back to nourishing the lifestyle practices that your body needs in order to support a healthy flow of those hormones. As I mentioned, a lot of people's hormonal issues are just based out of lifestyle deficiencies. They're stemming from not enough of the right connections, not enough intimacy or physical touch, which is all so important in oxytocin release. Other lifestyle deficiencies are just a lack of nourishment or a lack of physical movement or emotional movement in your body, a lack of safety, a lack of sleep, a lack of purpose, a lack of beliefs, a lack of hope, a lack of grace, like all of these things that make up your life. When we dismiss them for the chase of health, when we set them on the back burner, we create deficiencies that are our source of life and our source of health. We neglect these things, waiting to arrive at a place then we think we can live these things. But I want to tell you that's backwards. We will never arrive at the place we want to arrive, one, because there's no arrival, but we'll never really experience what we think we want when we arrive without understanding that it first starts from a healthy lifestyle. It starts by supporting the body by supplying the necessary functions to thrive. And when it comes to your biology, that's proper nourishment with a healthy blood sugar balance, because insulin is managing your blood sugar, which is managing your energy. Healthy connections, so important for our biology, is connecting with others, being intimate, physical touch, the nourishment of community, and then how we handle stress. And this isn't just saying all stress is bad. Again, stress is not bad. It's actually really good. Cortisol can be really good, but that's within a balance. That's within a flow. It's using that, but also learning how to regulate that, partly by shifting your perspective, but again, supplying these lifestyle practices of healthy sleep, healthy nourishing patterns, more movement that help you process the stress that your body's living within. And if you can do those things, you'll naturally start to heal the top tier hormones. Because if you fix the bottom ones, you'll fix your thyroid and your energy hormones and thus your sex hormones. Now, I bring all that up to hopefully end some confusion with sex hormones and the endless need to talk about estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, which, yes, are very valid topics of conversation. But we can only talk about those things to the degree in which we talk about and we work on those bottom tier hormones, which again are your stress, are your connections, and are your energy levels. Now, what I love so much about this conversation is it's really not that much about food. Yes, of course, when we talk about blood sugar and insulin, that is highly related to food, but we also have to understand that your body can produce sugar without eating anything at all. And it will do this in times of stress, in times of threat and conservation. Your body can turn different stores, especially muscle mass, into glycogen to be used as energy, thus increasing your insulin levels. And honestly, this happens all the time, whether you're eating or not. It's how you have energy to maintain the processes in life while you're sleeping. It's a process of gluconeogenesis. It's the ability for the body to convert things or to remove stores of sugar so that it can be used in the absence of consuming it. And that's why we know these things are important. When your body has the ability to provide, when you fail to, you know it's an important function inside the body. Needless to say, we need to work on these lifestyle practices because oftentimes the root cause of a lot of the symptoms we experience are actually stemming from these hormones, from an imbalanced nervous system, a lack of regulation, from an imbalance in blood sugar, and a lack of physical human connection. Those are critical in the health of our body. And ironically, when you work on one, you kind of work on the whole of them all. Not to mention, they're relatively easy things to manage. And in the previous podcast, we talked about regulating your nervous system. Now, we're going to talk about connections in a future podcast, but we also have to understand the health of your relationships is single-handedly influencing the health of your body. I once heard a psychologist state that your body is only as healthy as your most unhealthy relationship. And that has never left me. In fact, it's what led me to start to research the process of our nervous system and how important those connections are to the health of our body. And it's so true. Your connections and the health of those connections is changing your entire biology, and it happens because of the hormonal hierarchy. Needless to say, if you want to fix your hormones, you must work on these lifestyle practices. And again, I'm sharing more tips over in the blog post for this podcast at thelivingwell.com/330. And in the next podcast, I invited a special guest on, Dr. Jolene Brighton, to talk more about hormones, specifically hormones as we age and get into menopause, and what does that look like and mean to nourish our body in a way that supports our hormones. And we're specifically going to talk more about blood sugar regulation inside that podcast. But for now, don't forget to head to thelivingwell.com/330 to get all of the show notes for today's podcast. And as always, if you want to learn more, you want to get the hormone reset that I have, that's all found inside Health Made Simple. Again, Health Made Simple pulls it all together in one big picture, giving you the foundation of how to heal these lifestyle practices and really implement change so you can feel better in your everyday life. There's no more waiting, no more gimmicks, no more 60-day challenges. It literally happens all in your daily action. Check all of that out at The Living Well, and don't forget to come back here in the next podcast to learn more from Dr. Brighton. I'll see you then.